Hello and welcome to Vinnie's Day Off. Our topic for discussion today is Swiss Army knives. Over the last year or so, I've built a number of survival shelters using various folding knives. And the two questions I have been asked very often are, what is my opinion of Swiss Army knives? And could you build a shelter using a Swiss Army knife? The first one I bought was this. I believe it's a camper. I carried this for many years going to work, and when it was legal to do so, going out. It's a very useful little knife, and you have the two blades, but what is far more useful are these two screwdrivers, especially this smaller one which fits most Phillips screw heads. This one is used more for prying and poking and twisting and jamming things into, and MacGyvering, if you will. I'm sure guys come up with many uses for these corkscrews, but it got very little use with me. The next knife I got was this one, the Alpinier. At that time I was a bit obsessed with razor sharpness, and I may have ground the blade very thin, but it got a lot of chipping. That's why it's so worn looking now. So my opinion of Swiss Army knives is that they're a basically decent knife. Maybe not the most superb or greatest out there, but they're a good, decent knife. One thing I've never had is a saw. So that led me to buy this one. This is the Victorinox Rangergrip 78. And it is a fine big saw, a 4-inch blade saw. Almost 4-inch blade knife. On the back of this one, it has a proper Phillips screwdriver. I was very interested in this. As I say, the corkscrew is of no use to me, so that's why I wanted this. I have been asked by people in the comments to try out two specific knives. The first was the Farmer, and the second was the Trailmaster. I was very close to buying the Farmer. I like the look of the Farmer a lot, but I just thought it was a little small for what I would be doing. The Trailmaster likewise is a fine knife. Trailmaster was very interesting, but those knives that were offered for sale that were convenient for me to buy had a partially serrated blade, and this is an abomination before me. I wouldn't have it. There was no plain blade available, so I went with this Rangergrip. Like in many Swiss Army knives, you have the toothpick. Do or do not, there is no try. And you have the tweezers. Now I've watched many reviews on these and heard guys say how useful these were for taking out thorns and splinters and such. I must say I've found them completely useless in my experience. They're good for nothing except the most superficial thorn. Any thorn that has penetrated well, these aren't strong enough. They're too flimsy, too pliable. They won't grip. It's a superb idea, but it's badly executed. I believe these tweezers are much too weak and pliable. Okay. One thing I very much enjoy on YouTube is the fact that I get to interact and chat with many people from all over the world. One of the first people I came across was Iron Horse 19. Isn't that a cool name? And in the course of our chats, he offered to make me a strop. And he sent me to a website showing various styles and sizes of strops. What caught my eye was a little pocket strop. So I asked him if he could make that one for me, and he did. And this is it. I have it loaded with green compound. I could do it a little more actually. Now I was thinking of making something like this myself for a long time, but I never got around to it. This is smooth leather, and I'm contemplating getting some fine compound for this. But as you can see, it's ideal for the pocket. I'm really pleased with this, and we're going to try it out today. So thanks very much, Iron Horse 19. Much appreciated, and I really love this. Thank you very much. So, gentlemen and ladies, my second most asked question. Can you use a Swiss Army knife as a survival knife? Let's go find out. Okay, so our first order of business is to build a shelter. But today I'd like to discuss the amount of time it takes to build one of these shelters, and also the problems of logistics. You may not have all your resources in one area. I'm going to use brambles for cordage again, and I need to collect them here, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you later. Where I plan to build the shelter is about a mile that way. Okay? So I'm going to move around, collect some of these, and I'll get back to you. Okay? Okay guys, so we've collected our brambles for cordage. Now we need to hike to our shelter location a mile that way. This took us a half an hour. Okay? Okay guys, I plan to build my shelter here. It's taken us about an hour and 15 minutes to get here. We had to move through some fairly heavy brush, and there's no trail obviously up to this place. There's not a great deal of flat dry ground around here, so this is about as good as we're going to get. So our next order of business is gather some poles. Okay, let's see how the saw performs, guys. This pole is fairly long and I can get 2 shelter poles out of it. Okay, so let's have a go. Okay, I got a little bit hung up there, but I eventually got them down. So out of that I got 2 stout poles. It's a little bit of work with the saw, it's a little bit tedious, but it's well capable of cutting perfectly strong timbers that will make you a stout shelter. Let's try something else with the next pole. When I was a small boy, my dad showed me how to cut a pole with a knife. You bend the pole over and you cut across the fibres. It doesn't matter how big the pole is, if you can bend it, you can cut it, even with a tiny knife. What I'd like to find out now is, can I do the same with the saw? Okay? So let's give this pole a bend over. I'm getting hung up. Now, a bit of a bend. Whoopsie daisy. Not quite as we planned, but seemingly you can do the same with the saw. It's also convenient to make cuts around the pole with the knife and break it off. So let's see if we can make a little cut with the saw all around and break it off as well. Let's try that. We're a bit tight for space here. Where are we here? It works fine. For a small saw, it can do a lot of work, I'll tell you that. Right, let's crack on, guys. Here we have a pole that's somewhat thicker than I would try with the knife, to be honest. And I'd just like to see how the saw works with this one. Timber. Binding a little. Oopsie daisy. As I say, a little tedious, but you can cut quite respectable poles. Quite a solid pole with this little saw. Very useful, and definitely, I suppose, what you'd call a force multiplier, eh? The reason I had to gather brambles back at the other area is because the brambles here have been pretty much hammered by the deer. They've been nipping them off as they grow, nipping the tops off. So they're much shorter and more stunted. There's another example here. And let's find you some more. This one is the same. And that's what I mean, you may not have all the resources you need in one area. You may have to travel quite a distance to find what you need. So that's logistics for you. And this is the reason why we travel so far up here, guys. This is one of the very few places, believe it or not, left locally where I can get a plentiful supply of field rushes. And these are the only shelter material I would trust at this time of year, apart from sod, which would be a nightmare to cut without a spade. So I'm going to gather some of this. A little technique I came up with for cutting this is to grab your bunch at the top. Generally there's a lot of grass and crap growing through it. So if you grab your bundle up here and cut, you can pull it up and leave all the crap behind. Cutting these is also very hard on edge. You've there's clay and there's old rotten rushes growing there, and there's tough grass growing as well at the roots. This is very hard on edge, so the iron horse strop will come in very useful here. I'm going to cut away and I'll keep stropping as I cut, okay? So I've got a couple of hours work here at least, just to get the roof. Dice, come up or you'll get the snout cut of yourself. Come on, good lad. Dice. See you in a while, guys. It's 3 days later. Life got in the way again. I finished cutting the poles today. Searching for the poles, selecting them, cutting them, trimming them, getting them back here took about an hour and a half. Yesterday I came up and I cut the rushes. That took about 2.5 hours. It was raining away fairly steadily, so I didn't get any footage of that. It was pretty miserable, let me tell you. So hopefully we have enough. I'm going to build a shelter using tripods again. Using saplings to support a shelter is excellent, but it's very difficult to find 2 saplings in a level dry place that doesn't have a widowmaker hanging over it. A widowmaker being a big tree or a large branch that could possibly fall on you. You know, it's a very real danger. So that's why I've taken to making these shelters with 2 tripods as support. So I'd better get cracking or this video is going to take half the year. See you in a while, guys. Here we have the finished shelter. I meant to show more of the construction, but things went against me. The brambles this time of year are not as flexible. I had a good deal of trouble with them. But my intention was to do the whole thing with natural materials throughout. I used twine, excuse my fingers now, they're quite dirty. I used twine to finish the very top row here and to put the rushes on the side here as well. Also the tripods at both sides I reinforced with a little bit of binder twine just because it's holding the weight. I've got some spruce boughs laid down just to sit on. This is about the best use for spruce boughs in my opinion. Let's see if we can get a little fire going. Have a little twig bundle here. So, can you use a Swiss Army knife as a survival knife? Well, we've got a shelter sorted, a good waterproof shelter, we've got fire sorted. What's left? Cleaning some fish or cleaning game? I think it's a bloody good survival knife. And this little saw is a game changer. This was one of the easiest shelters I built. Now, it takes a little bit of time, but with a bit of patience and just let the saw do the work, it's quite an effective little saw. Now, there are many on YouTube who seem to believe that splitting wood is vital for survival. Splitting logs of firewood with their knife. Now, I searched throughout the wood and I could find no logs of firewood lying around, so I had to cut this one. So we're going to see if we can split this using this little knife. Okay, let's see how we get on. I've created kind of a knife wedge type implement here. So we've got our little cut started there. So if you really want to split wood, it's very possible. So how long did this little shelter take to build, guys? It took a half an hour to gather brambles. It took an hour to hike in here. It took about an hour and a half to gather the wood. It took 2.5 hours to gather the rushes. It took about another 2.5 hours to build this. I could have done it faster, but it went against me because the brambles were difficult to work with. This will tell you a couple of things. It'll show you, for instance, why I'm not throwing out 2 videos a week. It'll also show you how absolutely vital and precious something like a tarp or even a sheet of plastic or a small tent would be if you were travelling somewhere where there was a risk of being lost. The reason I went to so much effort is that I now have a very waterproof and a very strong and windproof shelter. It's an effective shelter. Anyway guys, that's the end of my video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and thanks very much for watching indeed. Can you use a Swiss Army knife as a survival knife? I think so. Bye bye.